I don't know about you, but one of my favorite things in this life happens to be coffee. And the reason for that is not just the taste and the sheer amount of cream and sugar that always ends up in my own coffee, but it's the sort of culture with coffee. I very much enjoy that coffee has almost become this sort of universal symbol, as a sort of intellectual juice, if you will. You always see it romanticized, going to the coffee shop to work on one's novel or homework or anything. Coffee is not just a drink with caffeine to help us wake up. For some it is. For me at least, the coffee shop has always been a place of creativity, relaxation, where I can go to work on my work or to work on my own novel. Depends on the flavor of today. And speaking of flavors, welcome to the Treat of the Week. This is going to be a new sort of video that I would like to do weekly, where the Treat of the Week, the treat could be a new book that I've discovered. It could be a coffee shop that I find on my travels that I wish to feature, or it could be anything else that I deem as my own little treat for the week. So I do hope you enjoy joining me with our discussions. And now for this week's treat of the week, for this week's treat, I should say, I wanted to talk a little bit about a book that I just picked up. Now, for me, I don't always sit and read intellectual books well into the night, lit only by a candle for company. I do read other things, and I must admit, do not think ill of me, but I do have a type when it comes to books that I turn to as what I call candy reading or sweet reading. And that sort of book for me is crime thrillers. Specifically, it's typically a female cop or lawyer, something to that effect, who encounters something that mysteriously connects to her past. If there's romance between her and maybe a partner, or she finds romance somewhere else, even better. But doesn't have to have romance, just usually some sort of female protagonist who's involved with law enforcement or lawyership, and they're investigating this big mystery that is somehow connected with their past. I don't know why this became my go-to reading material for a sort of break, if you will, but I find myself many times turning to it, and I've expanded my treats over the years to not just, female law enforcement, but just female protagonists in general facing strange situations that suddenly have cropped up in their life. And now, with all that being said, let's get on to the treat that I chose for this week. So as is my habit, I went to my local bookstore, and I always go in there without a plan, if you will. I like to just go and browse, and I sort of pick up a book that looks interesting at the time, and if I read the blurb in the first couple of pages and find it agreeable to something I'm looking forward to reading, I'll throw it into my bag, and that's that. The amount of books that I have bought over the years, I could probably purchase my own mansion at this point if I didn't spend all my money on books. But be that as it may, I was browsing through my local bookstore, and, going through the different shelves, I ended up with a pile of books in my arms, but the one that I put on top to read while I was traveling was this book here, The Coworker. So I haven't actually read anything by Freida McFadden before, but apparently she's written quite a few books along the same themes of The Coworker, The Maid, The Maid's Secret, The This, The That. So I saw some of her other books there, but this one sort of caught my eye as a new release, and the description also too was sort of interesting to me, really. And now here is the description that actually made me pick up the book and take it with me. 2 women, an office filled with secrets, one terrible crime that can't be taken back. Dawn Schiff is strange. At least everyone thinks so at Vicks, the nutritional supplement company where Dawn works as an accountant. She never says the right thing, she has no friends, and she is always at her desk at precisely 8:45 a.m. So when Dawn doesn't show up to the office one morning, her co-worker Natalie Farrell, beautiful, popular, top sales rep 5 years running, is surprised. Then she receives an unsettling anonymous phone call that changes everything. It turns out Dawn wasn't just an awkward outsider. She was being targeted by someone close. And now Natalie is irrevocably tied to Dawn as she finds herself caught in a twisted game of cat and mouse that leaves her wondering, who's the real victim? But one thing is incredibly clear. Somebody hated Dawn Schiff enough to kill. So after reading that description and seeing the cover art, I decided, well, let's give this a shot and see exactly what's going on. And I will say that now, having read the book, what I initially pictured from that description was not at all what ended up happening in the book. To my pleasant surprise, I will add. It definitely went in a direction that I was not expecting at all, but having read it now and looking back at this description, I can see what it was really talking about. An office filled with secrets. Certainly the office was full of secrets, a lot more than I thought initially. And the one terrible crime that can't be taken back is sort of a gray area. You think you know what the crime is that can't be taken back until you get to the end of the book and you realize, oh, that is not what I thought at all. And the characters themselves, I will say, no spoilers here, but the characters, all of them, each of them is not quite what they seem, and you're not quite sure of their motivations and really who is right and who is wrong. And I will say for Miss McFadden, having written this, she did a very good job of writing these sort of grey characters who I think feel a little bit more human in their motivations sometimes. Some books are very cut and dry, black and white, with who's right and who's wrong, and in this book you don't quite get that. I will say I do feel the characters, even with that being said, could have been a little bit more polished, maybe a little bit more character development or diving into their backgrounds, a little more history, I think, would have actually made a few more emotional connections between the reader and the characters themselves. Reading the book, it definitely was very much a candy book. I don't think it will be becoming a movie here anytime soon necessarily, or inspiring poetry, 100 years in the future. But it was enjoyable. It was cat and mouse. It was a twist and turn sort of read where you get to the end and realize, oh, that's not what I was expecting. I will say the ending wasn't super satisfying to me personally. I felt like it wasn't quite wrapped up to a decent conclusion. But for what the book is, as a candy read or a treat, if you will, I think it was reasonable. And so I would give it a solid 3.5 out of 5. Reasonably well written, interesting characters, unique characters in some ways, with motivations that do branch out a little bit from the typical ones that you would see. And a story that doesn't go the way you think, and I think that deserves some stars. But again, feel like there could have been a little bit more character development, a little bit character depth to it all, and maybe just a little bit more polishing on some of the plot points that felt a little shoved together. But for what it is, again, 3.5 out of 5 is solid read and something that you could easily finish in a single afternoon if you're sitting drinking tea or it's on your weekend and you want to while away the afternoon sitting in a comfortable chair with a good book. I think this is one that you could get through rather quickly and still get some reasonable enjoyment out of. And so that concludes our treat of the week. So our treat this week was The Coworker by Freida McFadden, and I actually purchased this book from my local Barnes & Noble. It's also available on their website, as you saw. It's also available on Amazon, and it seems to be anywhere books are sold, really. You could probably get your hands on this. So I would recommend if you're looking for something, as a treat or a candy book to read. I will say it does have some mentions of sexual activity. There is some cussing and mentions of violence as well. If that's something that you are sensitive to, this isn't something I would necessarily hand to a young child to read. I would say this is definitely 18 and up sort of read, if you will. But reasonably enjoyable, and if you've read this book before, do let me know. I'd be interested in discussing it. There were a couple of twists and turns there that, or at least the morally grey dilemmas that were presented towards the end that were worth discussing, I would think. But with that being said, I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for attending the Treat of the Week, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week. Pax vobiscum. Goodbye.